I'm Angelina, 28, and I was staring at my phone screen in complete shock. The text from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, was short but devastating. Honey, there are federal agents surrounding your house with guns drawn. My hands started shaking as I read those words again. Federal agents, guns drawn, at my house in Malibu. I was 3 states away on a reconnaissance mission in Texas, completely helpless to do anything but watch my life implode through text messages. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, trained to handle crisis situations, and I couldn't even protect my own home. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mrs. Patterson. They're searching everything. Tyler's car is gone. Tyler. My 20-year-old brother who was supposed to be house-sitting while I was deployed. The same brother who'd begged me for weeks to let him stay at my place during his summer break from UCLA because his dorm was too depressing and he wanted to experience Malibu properly. I should have said no. I should have remembered that Tyler had never been responsible for anything in his entire life. But family guilt is a powerful thing, and I'd caved when he promised he'd just study and relax. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt the sick dread of realizing you've been betrayed by someone you trusted. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Now, let me back up and tell you how I ended up here. 3 weeks earlier, I'd gotten orders for this reconnaissance mission that would take me to Fort Hood for classified aerial surveillance work. I'd been excited about it. It was exactly the kind of assignment that could advance my career as an intelligence specialist. Tyler had called me the day before I left, putting on that puppy dog voice he'd perfected since childhood. Sis, I know you're leaving tomorrow, but could I maybe crash at your place, just for the 3 weeks you're gone? I promise I'll take care of everything. I'd hesitated. Tyler's track record with responsibility was basically non-existent, but he was my only sibling, and despite everything, I loved him. Fine, I'd said. But Tyler, I'm serious. Don't touch anything that isn't yours. Don't have parties. Don't mess with my equipment. Scout's honor, he'd laughed. The kid had never been a scout in his life. I'd given him my spare key and detailed instructions about my security system, my neighbors, and most importantly, my work equipment. I had surveillance gear, communication devices, and yes, a military-grade drone that I used for reconnaissance training. That drone contained classified footage from previous missions. Not the kind of thing you want falling into the wrong hands. The drone is off limits, I'd told him specifically. It's military property, and it's classified. Don't even look at it funny. Tyler had nodded and promised he understood. Looking back now, I realized that was probably the exact moment he decided to sell it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what I found out happened while I was gone, because the truth was so much worse than I could have imagined. Tyler had lasted exactly 4 days before he got bored with my boring house and started exploring ways to fund his social life. The kid had blown through his summer job money in the first week buying clothes and going to expensive bars in West Hollywood. When the neighbors started organizing their annual summer garage sale, Tyler saw an opportunity. Or as he'd later put it in his defense statement, he was helping declutter my outdated electronics. I found all this out later from Mrs. Patterson, who had a front row seat to the whole disaster. She told me Tyler had spent an entire morning hauling what he called my old junk out to the driveway. My photography equipment, my backup computers, my collection of vintage military radios, and yes, the drone. Mrs. Patterson said she'd watched him set up tables and price everything like he was running his own personal electronics store. She'd even asked him if he was sure I'd be okay with him selling my things. Oh yeah, Tyler had told her with that confident smile that had gotten him out of trouble his whole life. Angelina told me to clear out all this old stuff while she's gone. She's upgrading everything anyway. The lie came so easily to him, so naturally, like he'd been planning it all along. Within 2 hours, he'd sold most of my equipment to early bird garage sale hunters who thought they were getting amazing deals on military surplus electronics. The drone went to a tech enthusiast named Marcus Chen for $300. $300. For a piece of equipment worth more than Tyler's car. Marcus apparently knew exactly what he'd bought. He was a military contractor himself, and when he got home and powered up the drone, he immediately realized it contained classified footage. To his credit, Marcus did the right thing. He called the base number printed on the drone's ID tag to report what he'd found. That's when everything went sideways. The military takes theft of classified equipment very seriously. Within hours, they'd traced the drone's GPS history back to my house and discovered it had been sold during an unauthorized garage sale. Federal agents don't mess around with potential security breaches. They mobilized a full response team to secure my property and arrest whoever was responsible. Tyler, meanwhile, was at Nobu, Malibu, dropping $200 on lunch with some girl he'd met at a beach volleyball game. He was probably bragging about his cool military sister and her awesome house, while federal agents were tearing apart that same house looking for evidence of espionage. He had no idea his world was about to collapse until he pulled into my driveway that evening and found it surrounded by black SUVs and tactical teams. Mrs. Patterson told me later that Tyler's face went completely white when he saw the scene. For a moment, she thought he might try to drive away, but there was nowhere to go. They had the street blocked. The lead agent approached his car with her weapon drawn, shouting for him to keep his hands visible and exit the vehicle slowly. That's when Tyler finally understood the magnitude of what he'd done. This wasn't some minor family dispute about selling things without permission. This was a federal crime involving national security. As they zip-tied his hands behind his back and read him his rights, Tyler kept saying the same thing over and over. "I need to call my sister. She'll explain everything. This is all a misunderstanding." But it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal wrapped in stupidity with a bow of entitlement on top. The call came at 2 a.m. Texas time. I was dead asleep in my barracks when my phone exploded with notifications, missed calls, texts, voicemails. The base duty officer knocked on my door to tell me I had an urgent family emergency call waiting. My first thought was that something had happened to our parents. I ran to the communication office in my pajamas, heart pounding, expecting the worst. Instead, I heard Tyler's voice, shaky and scared, calling from a federal detention facility. "Angelina? Thank God. Listen, there's been a huge mistake. The police arrested me, but I can explain everything. I just need you to come home and tell them." "Slow down," I interrupted, trying to process what I was hearing. "Where are you? What happened?" "I'm in jail," he said, and I could hear him starting to cry. "They're saying I stole classified military equipment, but I didn't steal anything. I just sold some old electronics at a garage sale. I thought they were yours." My blood turned to ice. "What electronics, Tyler?" "Just some old computers and cameras and that drone thing from your closet. The neighbors were all having garage sales and I needed some quick cash for—" I hung up on him. I literally hung up the phone and stood there in the communication office, staring at the wall while the full scope of what had happened crashed over me like a tidal wave. Tyler had sold my classified military equipment. Equipment that I was personally responsible for. Equipment that contained sensitive reconnaissance footage from multiple missions. My career was over. My security clearance was gone. I would probably face court-martial proceedings myself for failure to secure classified materials. All because my selfish, stupid little brother wanted beer money. Have you ever experienced that moment when someone you love destroys everything you've worked for? Share your story in the comments below. The duty officer was looking at me with concern. "Ma'am, do you need to make another call?" I nodded, though my hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. I called my commanding officer first, then the base security office, then the FBI agent whose number the duty officer had been given. Each conversation was worse than the last. Yes, they confirmed, classified materials had been compromised. Yes, my brother was in federal custody. Yes, I needed to return to California immediately for questioning. But here's the part that really broke me. Tyler called back 3 more times that night, each time more frantic than the last, begging me to fix this for him. "You have to tell them I didn't know," he pleaded. "Tell them it was an honest mistake. You can get me out of this, right? You know people. I know people. Like I was some kind of fixer who could make federal crimes disappear with a phone call." "Tyler," I said during his final call, my voice deadly calm, "do you understand what you've done?" "I made a mistake," he said quickly. "But we can fix it. You can fix it. You're good at fixing things." "I can't fix this," I told him. "You sold classified military equipment. Equipment that I was responsible for protecting. Equipment that could have put American lives at risk if it had fallen into the wrong hands." "But it didn't," he protested. "The guy who bought it called the army. Nothing bad happened. Nothing bad happened. As if my career and reputation and security clearance were nothing. As if the trust placed in me by my country was nothing. "You're going to need a lawyer, Tyler," I said. "A good one, because I can't help you with this." "What do you mean you can't help me?" "I'm your brother. And I'm a soldier," I replied, "and you just made me complicit in a security breach." I hung up again and turned off my phone. I had some hard thinking to do about what Tyler's betrayal really meant, and whether our family bond was worth destroying my principles to protect him. The flight back to Los Angeles was the longest 3 hours of my life. I kept thinking about how Tyler's stupid decision was about to unravel everything I'd worked for over the past decade. I'd enlisted right out of high school when Tyler was only 10 years old. While our parents focused all their attention on their youngest child, I'd found purpose and family in the military. I'd earned my rank through skill and dedication, not family connections or special favors. Tyler, meanwhile, had grown up as the golden child who never faced real consequences. Our parents had bailed him out of every scrape, covered every mistake, and somehow convinced themselves that spoiling him was the same as loving him. When his grades tanked sophomore year of high school, they hired tutors instead of making him repeat classes. When he crashed Dad's car, they bought him a new one. When he got caught cheating on his SATs, they hired a lawyer and donated money to get him into UCLA anyway. I'd watched all of this from a distance, telling myself it wasn't my problem. Tyler was their responsibility, not mine. But now he'd made it my problem in the worst possible way. The FBI agents who met me at LAX were professional but firm. Special Agent Morrison and Agent Kim escorted me to a black sedan and drove me straight to the federal building downtown, not to my house. "We need to establish a timeline of events," Agent Morrison explained, as we settled into an interrogation room that definitely didn't feel friendly, starting with when you last had physical custody of the equipment. I walked them through everything: the mission orders, Tyler's request to house sit, my specific instructions about not touching my equipment, the classified nature of the drone footage. "Did you have any reason to believe your brother might attempt to sell military property?" Agent Kim asked. I hesitated. The honest answer was complicated. Tyler had always been irresponsible with money, but I'd never imagined he'd be stupid enough to sell something that obviously belonged to the military. "My brother has poor judgment about money," I said carefully, but I specifically told him the drone was off limits and explained that it contained classified materials. They asked me about my security protocols, my storage procedures, my background check history. Every question felt like an indictment of my fitness to handle classified materials. After 2 hours of questioning, they drove me to my house to assess the damage. The place looked like a crime scene. Evidence tape across my front door, tire tracks on my lawn from the tactical vehicles, my garage door standing open with clear signs that everything inside had been searched and cataloged. Mrs. Patterson came over as soon as she saw me arrive. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I am so sorry. If I'd known what Tyler was planning, I would have stopped him." "It's not your fault," I told her, though part of me wondered if it was mine for trusting him in the first place. She told me about watching Tyler set up his makeshift electronics shop, about how confident he'd seemed about having permission to sell everything. "He told everyone you'd said it was okay," she said. "He had an answer for every question. That boy could charm a snake out of its skin." That was Tyler, all right. Charming and convincing and absolutely convinced that rules didn't apply to him. Agent Morrison handed me a card with Tyler's booking information. "He's been assigned a public defender, but you might want to consider private counsel. The charges are serious." 24 hours earlier, I'd been a decorated soldier on track for promotion. Now I was the sister of a federal prisoner, my own career hanging by a thread, while I considered whether to hire a lawyer for the person who'd destroyed my life. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and staring at the empty spaces where my equipment used to be. The FBI had returned some items that were clearly personal property, but anything that could be considered evidence was gone indefinitely. My phone had been buzzing nonstop with calls from Tyler, from our parents, from his public defender, from reporters who'd somehow gotten my number. I'd ignored them all. I needed to think clearly about what came next, and I couldn't do that with Tyler's voice in my ear begging me to save him from the consequences of his own actions. Our parents finally drove down from their house in San Francisco, arriving around noon in a state of controlled panic. "We came as soon as we heard," Mom said, rushing to hug me as if I were the one who'd been arrested. "This is all just a terrible misunderstanding. Tyler didn't mean any harm. Dad was more practical. What kind of lawyer does he need? Money isn't an object here." Money isn't an object. Of course it wasn't. Not when their precious baby boy was in trouble. "He needs a federal criminal defense attorney," I said flatly. "Someone who specializes in national security cases, and it's going to be expensive." "Whatever it costs," Mom said immediately. "We'll figure it out." They started making calls, using their business connections to find the best legal representation money could buy. I watched them spring into action the same way they'd been doing Tyler's whole life, mobilizing resources, calling in favors, treating his problems as emergencies that required immediate family intervention. "Have you talked to your commanding officer?" Dad asked during a break in phone calls. "Can you explain that Tyler didn't understand what he was doing?" "Tyler's lack of understanding doesn't change the fact that classified materials were compromised," I replied. "I'm probably going to face disciplinary action myself." Mom looked stricken. "But you weren't even here. How can they blame you?" "Because it was my responsibility to secure that equipment," I explained patiently. "That's how military accountability works. The buck stops with me." They didn't seem to grasp that my career was also in jeopardy, or that Tyler's stupidity had consequences beyond his own legal troubles. Their lawyer, a sharp woman named Sarah Collins, arrived that afternoon to discuss strategy. She was exactly the kind of high-powered attorney that cost $500 an hour. "The good news is that your brother's cooperation led to immediate recovery of the materials," she told us. The buyer contacted authorities right away, so there's no evidence of actual espionage or intent to harm national security. What's the bad news? I asked. The federal prosecutors are under pressure to take a hard line on military equipment theft. Even if Tyler's intentions were innocent, he knowingly sold property that didn't belong to him. That's a felony. She outlined possible sentences, plea arrangements, and defense strategies, while our parents took detailed notes and asked questions about every option. Nobody asked me what I thought Tyler deserved. Nobody asked if I wanted to help him at all. They just assumed I'd fall in line with the family's crisis management plan like I always had before. But this time was different. This time, Tyler's mess had crashed directly into my life and my career and my future. This time, I had to decide whether family loyalty was worth sacrificing my principles. And I was starting to think the answer might be no. Tyler's arraignment was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Our parents naturally assumed I'd be there to support him, standing united as a family in his time of need. We should all arrive together, Mom said, planning the logistics like we were attending a wedding instead of a federal court hearing. Show the judge that Tyler has a strong support system. I let them make their plans while I made my own decision. On Tuesday morning, I put on my dress uniform and drove to the federal courthouse alone. I wasn't there to support Tyler. I was there to give a victim impact statement about how his actions had affected my military career. The look on Tyler's face when he saw me walk into the courtroom in uniform was worth 1,000 family arguments. He'd been expecting his big sister to show up in civilian clothes, ready to help minimize his legal troubles. Instead, I sat in the section reserved for law enforcement and military personnel, clearly identifying myself as someone Tyler had wronged rather than someone who was there to help him. His public defender had done a decent job preparing a defense based on Tyler's youth, his lack of criminal history, and his genuine remorse. Sarah Collins, the expensive lawyer our parents had hired, was even better at painting Tyler as a misguided kid who'd made an honest mistake. But when the prosecutor called me to give my statement, the tone of the hearing shifted dramatically. Sergeant Williams, the prosecutor began, can you describe the impact of the defendant's actions on your military career? I stood straight and spoke clearly, the way I'd been trained to give briefings. Your Honor, the defendant's theft and sale of classified military equipment has resulted in a complete security review of my clearance status. I am currently suspended from all intelligence-related duties pending the outcome of that review. My career advancement has been indefinitely postponed, and I may face administrative discipline for failure to properly secure classified materials. Tyler's lawyer tried to interrupt, but I continued. The equipment the defendant sold contained reconnaissance footage from multiple classified missions. While the materials were recovered quickly thanks to the integrity of the buyer, the security breach could have had serious national security implications if they had fallen into hostile hands. I looked directly at Tyler for the first time since entering the courtroom. The defendant is my brother, and I want to be clear that I believe his actions were motivated by selfishness and poor judgment rather than malicious intent. However, the impact on both my career and national security remains the same regardless of his motivations. You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. Tyler was crying now, probably realizing for the first time that his actions had consequences beyond his own legal troubles. Our parents looked shocked that I'd testified against him instead of for him. The judge sentenced Tyler to 6 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation and 500 hours of community service. He also ordered Tyler to pay restitution for the cost of the security review and investigation. Our parents immediately began planning their visits to the federal facility where Tyler would serve his time. They talked about commissary money and phone calls and making sure he had everything he needed to be comfortable. I walked out of the courthouse and drove home without speaking to any of them. That evening, Dad called to demand an explanation for my betrayal of family loyalty. Tyler needed our support today, he said angrily. Instead, you made things worse for him. Tyler needed consequences, I replied calmly. Something he's never gotten from this family. He's going to prison, Angelina. Isn't that consequence enough? For stealing classified military equipment? Actually, no. It's exactly the consequence he earned. I hung up and turned off my phone. For the first time in Tyler's life, I wasn't going to clean up his mess. I wasn't going to visit him in prison, send him money, or help him get back on his feet when he got out. Tyler was about to learn what it meant to live without a safety net, and our parents were about to learn what it meant to enable someone into real trouble. As for me, I was about to learn what it meant to choose my principles over my family. It turned out to be easier than I'd expected. 6 months passed without a single word between Tyler and me. Our parents tried to guilt me into visiting him, sending me updates about how difficult prison was for their precious boy. He's lost weight, Mom would tell me during her weekly phone calls that I'd stopped answering. The food is terrible, and he's sharing a cell with someone who actually committed real crimes. Real crimes? as if stealing classified military equipment was just a youthful prank. Meanwhile, I was fighting to rebuild my career from the ground up. My security clearance review had taken 4 months, during which I was essentially useless to my unit. I spent those months doing administrative work and mandatory counseling sessions about family boundary management. My commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, called me into his office the day my clearance was finally restored. "Sergeant Williams," he said, looking at my file, "I want you to know that your handling of this situation has been exemplary. You prioritized national security over family pressure, and that took real integrity." "Thank you, sir," I replied, though I wasn't sure it felt like a victory. "However," he continued, "I'm recommending you for a transfer. Fresh start, new unit, chance to rebuild without this shadow hanging over you." The transfer was to Fort Carson in Colorado Springs. Mountain air, elite reconnaissance unit, and most importantly, 3,000 miles away from my family's drama. I accepted immediately. 2 weeks before my transfer, Tyler's lawyer called with an update I hadn't asked for. "Your brother is doing well in the federal facility," Sarah Collins reported. "He's been working in the kitchen and attending educational programs. He's actually requested information about military service requirements." That stopped me cold. "What kind of information?" "Apparently, he's been talking to some veterans in his unit about the possibility of enlisting after his release. He wanted to know if a federal conviction would disqualify him." I almost laughed. Tyler couldn't handle 3 weeks of house-sitting without screwing up. And now he thought he could handle military service? "It would depend on the conviction and the branch," I told her. "But honestly, Tyler lacks the discipline for military life. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below." What I didn't know was that Tyler's interest in the military wasn't just idle conversation. He'd been assigned to work detail with a former Marine named Rodriguez, who'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan before a drug conviction landed him in federal prison. Rodriguez had been telling Tyler stories about military structure, discipline, and accountability that were apparently making an impression. "Your sister's military?" Rodriguez had asked when Tyler mentioned our relationship. "Yeah, she's some kind of intelligence specialist," Tyler had replied. "She's the one whose equipment I sold." Rodriguez had stared at him for a long moment. "You sold your sister's military equipment? Man, that's messed up." It was the first time anyone had called Tyler's actions what they really were, a betrayal of trust that went beyond simple theft. "She won't even visit me," Tyler had complained. "My parents say she's being vindictive." "Nah," Rodriguez had said, shaking his head. "She's being a soldier. Military people don't play games when it comes to security. You screwed up and she's making you face the consequences." These conversations were apparently the beginning of Tyler's attitude shift, though I wouldn't learn about any of this until much later. All I knew was that I was moving to Colorado and leaving my family's mess behind me. My parents threw a going-away dinner that felt more like a funeral. They kept bringing up Tyler's absence like an open wound, hoping I'd finally crack and agree to visit him before leaving California. "He asks about you every time we call," Dad said during dessert. "He knows you're leaving, and he's heartbroken that you won't say goodbye." "Tyler made his choices," I replied for the 100th time. "I made mine." "Family forgives, Angelina," Mom added. "That's what family does." "Family also holds each other accountable," I countered. "That's what I'm doing." I flew to Colorado the next day with 2 duffel bags and a clear conscience. Fort Carson was exactly what I needed: professional, focused, and completely separate from the dysfunction I'd left behind. My new unit specialized in high-altitude reconnaissance, and my experience with drone surveillance made me a valuable addition from day one. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Colorado was a revelation: clean mountain air, challenging work, and colleagues who knew me for my skills, rather than my family drama, made all the difference in my recovery. My new commanding officer, Major Thompson, was a straight shooter who appreciated competence and despised excuses. My first assignment was leading a training exercise for new recruits on surveillance protocol. "Sergeant Williams," she told me during my initial briefing, "I've read your file. What happened in California shows me you understand that some things are more important than family pressure. That's exactly the kind of integrity I need in my senior staff." The work was demanding, but rewarding. High-altitude reconnaissance required precision, physical conditioning, and mental toughness. I threw myself into it completely, grateful to have something that demanded all my attention. Meanwhile, Tyler was discovering what life looked like without family bailouts. His letters started arriving about 3 months into his sentence. I didn't read them at first, just stacked them on my kitchen counter like bills I didn't want to pay. But eventually, curiosity got the better of me. The first few letters were exactly what I'd expected: complaints about prison conditions, requests for money, and subtle attempts to manipulate me into visiting. Classic Tyler behavior. But by the 4th letter, something had changed in his tone. "Angelina," he wrote, I've been thinking a lot about what you said at my sentencing, about consequences and accountability. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant. He described his work detail in the kitchen, where showing up late or doing sloppy work meant other inmates didn't eat on time. For the first time in his life, Tyler's laziness had immediate consequences that affected other people. There's this guy Rodriguez who's been helping me understand some things, Tyler continued. He told me that when you mess up in the military, people can die. He said that's probably why you took what I did so seriously. I set the letter down, genuinely surprised. Tyler was actually taking responsibility for his actions instead of making excuses. The letters kept coming, documenting what seemed like genuine personal growth. Tyler wrote about educational programs he was attending, about learning to budget the small amount of money our parents sent for commissary items, about understanding for the first time how his privileged upbringing had failed to prepare him for real life. I've been talking to Rodriguez about military service, one letter said. He thinks I might be able to get a waiver for my conviction if I can prove I've changed. I know you probably think I'm not cut out for it, but I want to try. I wrote back for the first time, a short note that said simply, "Talk is cheap, Tyler. Actions matter." His response surprised me again. "You're right," he wrote. "Actions matter. That's why I'm not asking you to believe I've changed. I'm just asking you to watch what I do after I get out." 6 months later, Tyler was released to a halfway house in Los Angeles. Our parents immediately offered to let him move back home, pay for his remaining college tuition, and essentially pick up where they'd left off before his arrest. Tyler shocked everyone by declining. Instead, he got a job at a construction company, found a tiny apartment he could afford on his own, and started paying his own bills for the first time in his life. "He's being ridiculous," Mom complained to me during one of her update calls. "We have plenty of room and he's struggling unnecessarily." "Maybe struggling is exactly what he needs," I replied. Though privately I was impressed that Tyler was sticking to his decision. He wrote to me about the challenges of independent living, how expensive groceries were, how difficult it was to get by on construction wages, how exhausting physical labor could be. But he also wrote about how proud he felt when he paid his rent on time, how satisfying it was to solve his own problems, how much he appreciated things he'd always taken for granted. "I never understood what you meant about earning things," one letter said. "I thought you were just being stubborn when you refused family help. Now I get it. Nothing feels as good as knowing you did it yourself." A year after his release, Tyler did something that shocked our entire family. He enlisted in the Army. I was leading a training exercise when I got the call from our parents. Tyler had walked into a military recruitment office and signed enlistment papers without telling anyone. "He's lost his mind," Dad said when he reached me that evening. 4 years in the Army? He could be going back to UCLA instead, finishing his degree like a normal person. "The Army doesn't take everyone," I pointed out. "Tyler must have gotten a waiver for his conviction. That's not easy." "You could talk to him," Mom suggested. "Make him see reason. He listens to you." Actually, Tyler had never listened to me about anything important, but apparently, prison had changed more than just his work ethic. I called Tyler that night, curious about his decision. "I know you probably think this is another one of my impulsive choices," he said when he heard my voice, "but I've been planning this for months." Rodriguez helped me understand what I needed to do to get a waiver. "Why the Army, Tyler?" I asked directly. There was a long pause before he answered. "Because I want to understand what you've been trying to teach me my whole life," he said quietly. "About service, about accountability, about being part of something bigger than yourself." I was genuinely surprised by the maturity in his voice. "And because," he continued, "I want to prove to you that I can be the kind of person who deserves to have you as a sister." That hit me harder than I'd expected. Tyler shipped out to basic training at Fort Moore in Georgia 3 months later. Our parents were beside themselves, convinced their baby boy would be broken by military discipline. I knew better. If Tyler had genuinely changed the way his letters suggested, basic training might be exactly what he needed to complete his transformation. His first letter from basic was a revelation. "Day 3, and I'm already grateful for all those construction jobs," he wrote. "I'm in better shape than most of the other recruits. And I actually know how to work hard for 8 hours straight." Who knew prison and manual labor would be good preparation for something? Unlike his letters from federal prison, these updates were focused entirely on his own growth, rather than seeking sympathy or validation. "The drill sergeants are tough, but fair," he wrote after his first month. "They don't care where you came from or what your family has. They only care about what you do right now, today. I think I understand why you love this." I found myself looking forward to his letters in a way I hadn't expected. This version of Tyler, responsible, self-aware, focused on improvement, was someone I'd never met before. Meanwhile, my own career was flourishing in Colorado. Major Thompson had recommended me for advanced reconnaissance training, and I was being considered for a specialized assignment that would take my career to the next level. Sergeant Williams, she told me during my annual review, you've rebuilt your reputation completely. Your family situation was a test of your character, and you passed with flying colors. 8 weeks into Tyler's basic training, I got an unexpected call from his drill sergeant. Sergeant Williams, this is Drill Sergeant Martinez from Charlie Company. I understand Private Williams is your brother. My heart sank. Tyler had screwed up somehow, and they were calling family members. Yes, sir. Is there a problem? On the contrary, Martinez replied. I wanted you to know that your brother is one of the most improved recruits I've seen in 15 years. He started behind the curve but worked harder than anyone to catch up. He's become a leader in his platoon. I was speechless. He talks about you constantly, Martinez continued. Says he's trying to become the kind of soldier his sister would be proud of. I thought you should know that he's succeeding. After Tyler graduated basic training, he was assigned to Fort Liberty for advanced infantry training. His letters described grueling exercises, night missions, and leadership challenges that would have broken the old Tyler completely. But this Tyler was thriving. I volunteered to be squad leader for our final exercise, he wrote. 6 months ago, I couldn't even be trusted to house sit without stealing your stuff. Now I'm responsible for 8 other soldiers. It's terrifying and amazing at the same time. 2 years passed like this, Tyler excelling in his military service while I advanced in my own career. We exchanged letters regularly, building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. But we still hadn't seen each other face to face. That was about to change in a way I never could have anticipated. I was scheduled for a routine assignment at Fort Liberty, conducting a training assessment for new reconnaissance units. It was supposed to be a 3-day evaluation of their drone surveillance capabilities. What I didn't know was that my colleagues back at Fort Carson had been planning something special. Major Thompson had noticed that I'd been exchanging letters with my brother for over 2 years without ever seeing him. She'd also noticed that I'd never taken the leave time I'd earned during my time in Colorado. Williams, she'd told me before I left, take some extra time while you're at Fort Liberty. You've earned it. I'd assumed she meant I should visit the coast or explore North Carolina. I had no idea she'd been coordinating with people at Fort Liberty to arrange something much more significant. My first day at the base was routine. I evaluated training protocols, observed drone operations, and met with unit commanders about surveillance improvements. But on the second day, Captain Rodriguez, no relation to Tyler's prison mentor, asked me to observe a special demonstration. We've got a reconnaissance team doing a live exercise, she explained. Their squad leader specifically requested that you evaluate their performance. I agreed, curious about which unit had made this request. The exercise was set up in a mock village scenario where the reconnaissance team had to identify and neutralize simulated threats while gathering intelligence. Standard training, but executed with impressive precision. The squad leader was directing his team with confidence and skill that impressed even me. His voice was familiar, but I couldn't place it from my position in the observation area. Alpha team, advance to position 2, he commanded. Bravo team, maintain overwatch. Delta, prepare to deploy the surveillance drone. It wasn't until the exercise concluded and the squad leader removed his helmet that I understood what was happening. Tyler, my little brother, now a staff sergeant, stood at attention while his commanding officer debriefed the exercise. He looked older, more mature, and completely comfortable in his leadership role. I stared at him in shock, trying to reconcile this professional soldier with the irresponsible kid who'd stolen my equipment 4 years earlier. Captain Rodriguez appeared beside me with a smile. Surprise, she said quietly. Staff Sergeant Williams specifically requested this assignment when he heard you were coming for evaluation. He's been planning this demonstration for weeks. Tyler's commanding officer was finishing his debrief. Outstanding work, Sergeant Williams. Your team executed flawlessly under observation conditions. Thank you. Sir? Tyler replied in a voice I barely recognized, confident, respectful, and completely professional. Then his commanding officer said something that stopped my heart. Staff Sergeant Williams, I believe you have a distinguished visitor you'd like to meet. Tyler turned toward the observation area, his eyes finding mine immediately. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the training ground. 4 years of separation, transformation, and growth stood between us. Then Tyler approached, came to attention, and saluted. Sergeant Williams, he said formally. Permission to speak freely? I returned his salute, my mind reeling. Permission granted. Tyler's military bearing dropped slightly, and for the first time, I saw my little brother's eyes in this confident soldier's face. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he said quietly, his voice carrying just far enough for me to hear. But I hope I've earned the right to ask for it. I looked at this man who'd once been so selfish and irresponsible that he destroyed my career for beer money. Now he was a respected squad leader who'd organized an entire military demonstration just to show me who he'd become. "Tyler," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "you didn't just earn the right to ask. You earned the answer you're hoping for." He smiled, then the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since he was a child. "Does this mean you'll finally let me buy you dinner?" he asked. "I know a place that serves something other than prison food and MREs." I laughed despite myself. "Staff Sergeant Williams," I said formally, "I accept your invitation." But I wasn't quite ready to forgive everything just yet. That evening, Tyler and I sat across from each other in a small restaurant near Fort Liberty. 4 years of separation had created a gulf between us that wouldn't be bridged by a single conversation, no matter how impressive his military transformation had been. "I need you to understand something," I told him after we'd ordered. "What you didn't just affect my career, it affected my entire sense of trust. Not just in you, but in family relationships in general." Tyler nodded, his expression serious. "I know. I've had 4 years to think about what I took from you." "Have you?" I asked pointedly. "Because our parents act like it was just a youthful mistake that everyone should forget about. Our parents still don't understand what I did," Tyler replied. "They think I stole some equipment and got caught. They don't understand that I betrayed your trust and endangered your career and possibly national security." That surprised me. The old Tyler had always hidden behind our parents' minimization of his actions. "Rodriguez helped me understand the difference," Tyler continued. "He explained military accountability and how what I did was basically the same as if I'd sold out your entire unit." I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to, but Tyler's expression was genuinely remorseful, without the calculating look that used to accompany his apologies. "Why didn't you call me when you enlisted?" I asked. Tyler looked down at his hands. "Because I knew you'd think it was another impulsive decision, another way to avoid real consequences. I needed to prove I was serious before I had any right to contact you." 2 years of letters wasn't contact? Letters were safe, he admitted. "You could ignore them if you wanted to. Calling would have been forcing you to deal with me before you were ready." I had to acknowledge that he was right. If Tyler had called me from basic training, I probably would have assumed he was looking for sympathy or trying to manipulate me into supporting him. "Tell me about your squad," I said, changing the subject to safer ground. Tyler's face lit up as he described his team, 8 soldiers from different backgrounds who'd learned to trust each other completely. He talked about training exercises, leadership challenges, and the responsibility he felt for their safety and success. "It's the first time in my life that other people depended on me for something important," he said. "Not for money or favors or getting them out of trouble, but for leadership and protection. It changes everything." "How so?" "When someone's life might depend on your decisions, you can't afford to be selfish or lazy or careless," Tyler explained. "Every choice matters. Every detail matters. I finally understand what you tried to tell me about accountability." We talked for 3 hours. Tyler told me about his plans for military advancement, his goal of becoming a reconnaissance specialist like me, and his hope of eventually earning assignment to an elite unit. But he also acknowledged the damage he'd done to our relationship. "I don't expect you to trust me immediately," he said as dinner ended. "I know I have to earn that back, but I hope you'll give me the chance to try." I considered his request carefully. The Tyler sitting across from me was genuinely different from the irresponsible kid who'd betrayed me 4 years earlier. But forgiveness wasn't just about his transformation, it was about my willingness to risk being hurt again. "Here's what I'm willing to offer," I said finally. "We can rebuild our relationship slowly, based on your actions rather than your promises. But Tyler, if you ever betray my trust again, in any way, it's over permanently." Tyler nodded solemnly. "I understand, and I accept those terms." As we left the restaurant, Tyler stopped outside. "Angelina," he said quietly, "there's something else I need to tell you." My heart sank. Here it came, the real reason he'd arranged this meeting, the favor he needed, the problem he wanted me to solve. "I'm deploying to Afghanistan in 6 months," he said. "And I wanted you to know that if something happens to me over there, the last 4 years have been worth it. Not because of the military career, but because they gave me the chance to become someone you might actually be proud of." I stared at him, completely unprepared for this revelation. "Tyler," I said slowly, "I am proud of you. Not because you became a soldier, but because you became a man who takes responsibility for his actions." For the first time since he was 10 years old, Tyler hugged me, and for the first time in 4 years, I hugged him back. But his deployment news had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. Just when I was getting my brother back, he was going into danger. Maybe it was time to let go of the past completely and focus on whatever future we might have left. Tyler's deployment to Afghanistan lasted 15 months. During that time, we exchanged emails regularly, building the relationship we'd never had as siblings. His messages described the challenges of combat leadership, the responsibility he felt for his squad's safety, and the personal growth that came from facing life-or-death situations. But they also revealed a maturity and perspective that impressed me constantly. Being deployed makes you realize what actually matters, he wrote after 3 months in country. I used to think I deserved things just because I existed. Now I understand that everything worth having must be earned, including the respect of the people you lead and love. I found myself genuinely worried about his safety in a way I'd never experienced before. The irresponsible kid who'd sold my equipment had been easy to write off, but this version of Tyler, thoughtful, dedicated, courageous, was someone I couldn't bear to lose. When he returned from deployment, Tyler had been promoted to Sergeant First Class and awarded a Bronze Star for valor during a reconnaissance mission that saved his entire platoon from an ambush. Our parents threw a welcome home party that I actually attended, flying in from Colorado to celebrate his safe return. Watching Tyler interact with our family was like seeing a completely different person. He was respectful but not submissive, confident but not arrogant. When our parents tried to baby him or make excuses for his past behavior, he gently redirected the conversation. I made serious mistakes, he told them firmly when Mom tried to minimize his conviction. Mistakes that hurt Angelina and could have endangered national security. I'm grateful for the second chance I've been given, but I don't want anyone to forget what I did wrong. After the party, Tyler and I took a walk along the beach near our parents' house. I have something to ask you, he said as we watched the sunset, but I want you to know you can say no without any hard feelings. I braced myself for whatever favor was coming. I've been accepted for Special Forces training, Tyler continued. It's a 2-year program, and it's incredibly demanding. I want to do it, but not if it means losing the relationship we've rebuilt. I stopped walking and turned to face him. Tyler, I said, 4 years ago, you stole my equipment to buy drinks for college parties. Now you're asking my opinion about Special Forces training. Do you understand how proud that makes me? His face lit up with relief and joy. You really think I can do it? He asked. I think you can do anything you set your mind to, I replied honestly. You've already proven that. Tyler completed Special Forces training with honors and was assigned to a unit specializing in reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, the same field I dedicated my career to. 2 years later, we found ourselves working together on a joint training exercise between our units. The irony wasn't lost on either of us that Tyler had become exactly the kind of soldier I'd always been proud to serve alongside. You know what's funny? Tyler said as we reviewed surveillance footage during the exercise. I spent my whole childhood trying to get your attention by being irresponsible and demanding. It turns out all I had to do was become someone worth respecting. It wasn't about becoming someone else, I told him. It was about becoming who you really were underneath all that entitlement and selfishness. As I watched my brother, now a decorated Special Forces sergeant, brief his team on reconnaissance protocols, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. Tyler's betrayal had nearly destroyed my career and shattered my trust in family relationships. But his transformation had taught me something equally valuable about forgiveness, growth, and second chances. Not everyone deserves a second chance, but some people earn it through genuine change and consistent action over time. Tyler had done more than earn his second chance. He'd earned my respect, my trust, and my genuine admiration for the man he'd become. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about family, forgiveness, and the power of personal transformation. Sometimes the people who hurt us most can also teach us the most about grace and growth. Our relationship today isn't perfect, but it's real in a way it never was before. Built on mutual respect rather than family obligation, strengthened by shared values rather than shared DNA. Tyler kept his promise to show me who he could become, rather than asking me to believe who he said he was. And I learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting what someone did to you. It's about choosing to focus on who they've become instead of who they used to be. The best revenge against betrayal isn't punishment. It's watching someone become worthy of the trust they once broke, and knowing you were strong enough to give them that chance.